The bailiff cried out, "He's faking it again." The veteran's knees buckled. He landed with a thud on the floor. No one stirred until the judge stood up from the bench, expression inscrutable, and said, "This courtroom owes him more than silence." Who was this man in tatters? And what did the judge know that no one else had forgotten? Tell us where you're sitting, because somewhere in the world there still exist people who think that forgotten heroes should be remembered. Well, come to Deep Story Dispatch. Raymond Ellis had been scrubbing the courthouse steps for precisely 1,247 days. At 62 years old, his hands were dry and cracked from weather and labor, his spine curved from resting on pavement. But at 6 a.m. every morning, sharp, he was there with his frayed mop and bucket. No one told him to clean those steps. No one paid him. Millfield's county courthouse had been his cathedral, and he its quiet guardian. The locals referred to him as Ray the Mop, some fondly, others with tired patience. This Tuesday morning in October was different for Raymond. He still wore the same frayed jacket, but a small piece of folded cloth around his neck was new. He kept nervously fidgeting with it. Within courtroom 3, there was a dispute over property. The Wilson family alleged their grandmother's house had been sold without legal authorization while she was in the hospital. Raymond hadn't intended to become involved, but 3 weeks prior he'd overheard the discussion that could resolve it all. As he was cleaning the fountain at the courthouse, he had heard Daniel Morrison, the purchaser, tell his attorney that he knew the old lady was not competent when he purchased the property. Raymond had been found by the Wilsons' attorney, who had brought him from sleeping in back of the Dairy Queen to the back row of the courtroom, where the folded cloth at his neck grew heavier by the second. The murmurs began at once. What is he doing here? They admit homeless individuals into courtrooms these days. Somebody ought to see if he's had a drink. Judge Arthur Bell sat with his customary stern formality. Bell, at 58, was respected for running a well-organized courtroom with little tolerance for theatrics. His gray hair was immaculately styled, his black robe spotless, his reputation for impartiality second only to his reputation for coldness. The case proceeded normally until Raymond was called to testify. He stood slowly, joints protesting, and made his way to the witness stand. The courtroom fell silent, not out of respect, but curiosity about what this vagrant might say. "State your name for the record," the clerk instructed. "Raymond Ellis," he said quietly, voice rusty from disuse. "And where do you live, Mr. Ellis?" Raymond hesitated. "I around town. Different locations." Some people looked at each other. One guy spoke up loudly. "Homeless dude? This is going to be good." Raymond's testimony was straightforward and concise. He recounted precisely what he had overheard, when he had overheard it, why he was so sure of the specifics. His memory was good, his story coherent. But as he testified, he began to run out of breath. Sweat pounded on his forehead in spite of the air conditioning. Mr. Ellis, defense counsel, stood up to cross-examine. "Aren't you living on the streets?" "Several years now?" "Yes, sir. And isn't it conceivable that your situation could influence your memory of things as accurately as they really happened?" Raymond's hand went automatically to the cloth against his throat. "My situation doesn't influence my hearing, sir. But don't you recognize that your credibility could be called into question based on your way of life?" The words lingered in the air. Raymond's breathing shallowed. The courtroom was hot, the lights blinding, the burden of judgment heavy on his shoulders. "I don't," Raymond started, then halted. He clung to the witness stand. Knuckles whitened. "Mr. Ellis," the judge said, "are you okay?" Raymond struggled to speak, but no sounds emerged. His vision grew dim. The cloth tied around his neck seemed to be rustling into his very airways. 8 years of sleeping on the streets, homeless, of being unseen, of shouldering. Lies that no one would ever credit. It all came down on him at once. His knees gave way. Purple Heart winner Raymond Ellis, Bronze Star winner, the man who had single-handedly saved 17 lives during Kosovo, fell to the courtroom floor with a disgusting splat. The bailiff was first to react, but not with concern. "He's faking it again," he shouted, assuming this was another ploy by a desperate homeless man seeking attention. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps, but nobody moved to help. Nobody knelt beside him. Nobody checked if he was breathing until Judge Arthur Bell rose from his bench. The judge's face was unreadable as he stepped down from his elevated position, black robes flowing behind him. The courtroom fell silent, everyone watching as this stern, unapproachable man approached the fallen figure. Bell knelt beside Raymond and gently turned him over. That's when he saw it clearly. The folded cloth around Raymond's neck wasn't just fabric. It was a small American flag worn thin from years of careful handling, and pinned to the inside where only Raymond could see it was a bronze star medal. Within hours, cell phone videos of Raymond's collapse were circulating online. The footage showed different perspectives. The homeless man falling, the judge rising, the crowd doing nothing. But context was missing, and the internet filled gaps with assumptions. Comments sections exploded with competing narratives. Homeless guy fakes medical emergency to get sympathy in court. Pathetic. Why did the judge get up? What does he know? That we don't? Classic manipulation. These people will do anything for attention. Something's not right here. That judge looked like he recognized him. Local news picked up the story, but their angle was predictable. Homeless man disrupts court proceeding. Coverage focused on inconvenience, delayed justice, whether vagrant witnesses should be allowed in courtrooms. But 3 people began digging deeper. Sarah Martinez, a 25-year-old legal intern who cleaned the courthouse evenings to pay for law school, had noticed Raymond's daily routine. She tried researching his background after the incident, but his military records came back classified. Or missing. That's weird, she told her supervisor. Usually you can find something, but it's like he doesn't exist in the system. Meanwhile, online detective work produced 2 conflicting narratives. A Facebook group called Millfield Truth labeled Raymond a stolen valor case, a faker, wearing unearned military decorations. But another group, led by local veterans, wasn't sure. Tom Hartley, a Gulf War veteran who ran the local American Legion post, recognized something in Raymond's bearing that didn't match his homeless appearance. "I've seen a lot of guys come home broken," Hartley posted on his blog, "but I've also seen guys who carry themselves like this man. There's something in the way he stands. Even when broken down, that's not something you can fake." The most telling comment came from an unexpected source. On the viral video buried among hundreds of replies, someone with username Bravo9999 had written, "If he's still alive, then we weren't left behind after all." The comment disappeared within hours, but Sarah Martinez had screenshot it. Raymond himself remained silent throughout the media storm. He had been taken to county hospital after his collapse, treated for dehydration and exhaustion, released, the next day with nowhere to go. He returned to his routine as if nothing happened. Clean the steps, sit on the bench, watch the world pass by. When reporters approached, he simply said, "No comment," and kept working. But privately, the attention was crushing him. That night, sitting behind the courthouse with a small notebook he had carried for years, Raymond wrote a single entry. "Nobody needs to know, but if just one person remembers, I won't completely disappear." The next morning, Sarah Martinez arrived, early for her cleaning shift, and found the notebook on the courthouse steps. Raymond had dropped it while fleeing from another reporter. She opened it, looking for identification, a way to return it. What she found instead were pages of neat handwriting documenting years of observations. Mrs. Henderson's grandson visited today. "First smile I've seen from her in months." New attorney seems nervous. Hope he figures it out. Judge Bell looked tired. Wonder if he's sleeping. But it was the page near the back that stopped her cold. In Raymond's careful handwriting. Arthur Bell, Bravo, Team 9, Kosovo, 1999. He made it home. That's enough. Sarah stared at the entry. Judge Bell had served in Kosovo. She had worked in his courtroom for 6 months and never heard him mention military service. She flipped back through the notebook looking for more references. There were several. Dreamed about the extraction again. A.B. was so young then. Heard helicopters today. A.B. flinched during the flyover. He remembers too. 23 years next month. Wonder if A.B. knows I'm here. Sarah Martinez, legal intern and part-time courthouse janitor, was holding evidence of a connection between the city's most respected judge and its most invisible resident. A connection that went back to a war most people had forgotten. But she was also holding something else. The private thoughts of a man who had chosen invisibility, who had deliberately hidden from recognition or reward, the ethical implications. were staggering. Did she have the right to expose Raymond's secret? Did she have the obligation to reveal Judge Bell's potential conflict of interest? Or was there something bigger at play, something that required a different kind of justice? That evening, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of returning the notebook to Raymond or turning it over to court officials, she did something that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. She walked to Judge Bell's chambers and knocked on the door. "Your Honor," she said when he answered, "I think you need to see this." Judge Bell looked at the notebook in her hands, and for the first time since Sarah had known him, the stern, composed judge's face showed emotion. Not anger, not surprise, but something deeper, recognition, and pain. "Where did you find this?" he asked quietly. "Raymond Ellis dropped it," Sarah replied. "He's been writing about you for years." Judge Bell took the notebook with hands that Sarah noticed were shaking slightly. He opened to the page Sarah had marked, read the entry about Bravo Team 9, and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I owe that man more than silence," he said, echoing words that courthouse security cameras had captured, but no one had fully understood. "Your Honor," Sarah asked. Judge Bell looked at her with the expression of a man who had been carrying a secret for 23 years and suddenly realized he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. "Miss Martinez," he told her, "tomorrow morning, I'm going to make this courthouse and this community aware of who Raymond Ellis is." Judge Arthur Bell laid awake. In his study that night, surrounded by files he hadn't cracked open in more than 2 decades. The notebook rested open on his desk, Raymond's meticulous handwriting a reminder of years spent watching in silence. Bell's memories came rushing back to him. Kosovo, 1999. Lieutenant Arthur Bell, 34, in a military advisor role during NATO intervention. Bravo, Team 9, an elite unit assigned to extract international observers from a besieged compound. The operation had failed. Intelligence was bad, the compound better fortified than anticipated, and Bell's men getting pinned down with civilian casualties and no apparent path of extraction. That's when Staff Sergeant Raymond Ellis made a choice that would save 17 lives. And cost him everything. Bell recalled the explosion, the ringing in his ears, the way Raymond emerged through smoke with Bell draped over his shoulder after he had taken shrapnel in his own back. Raymond made 3 trips back into that compound, retrieving wounded personnel under fire until helicopters could land finally. The official report was classified. The mission had never actually occurred technically. Raymond's bravery was documented in files that would be kept under seal for 25 years. Raymond was recommended for the Medal of Honor. Bell had personally written the recommendation. Instead, Raymond was awarded the Bronze Star in a hushed ceremony before commanding officers alone. No media, no family, no notice. Bell recalled the last time he'd seen Raymond, the young sergeant, reclining in a military hospital, looking out the window, recovering from physical injuries. But Bell could tell that deeper injuries, the ones received from saving lives in a war that didn't officially take place, were only just starting. "I can't go home and pretend this didn't matter," Raymond had said. But I can't go home and tell the truth either." Bell had vowed to keep in contact. They all had, but special ops troops dispersed like seeds on the wind. Bell had returned home, completed law school, established a career, raised a family. He never had attempted to locate Raymond Ellis before. The next morning, Judge Bell was at the courthouse earlier than most. He had placed a number of calls and received authorization to declassify parts of Raymond's service record. At 9, courtroom 3 was full. Rumor had circulated that Judge Bell was delivering an unprecedented announcement about the homeless man who'd collapsed in the witness stand. Raymond was present as well, sitting back in the row as usual, with no idea his whole life was fixed to change. Judge Bell walked in dressed in his black robes, but something was different about the way he stood. Gone was the stern, aloof judge. In his place was a man bearing the burden of long overdue truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, "before we get underway with today's docket, I have an announcement to make." He gazed straight at Raymond, who shifted awkwardly under sudden scrutiny. "Yesterday, a man fainted in this courtroom. Some of you have seen it. Most of you have viewed the videos on the internet. There has been talk about that man's integrity, his right to be present here." Judge Bell hesitated, never looking away from Raymond's eyes. I want to make things clear. The man who fell ill yesterday is Staff Sergeant Raymond Ellis, United States Army Special Operations, Bronze Star recipient, Purple Heart recipient, a man who saved 17 lives in Kosovo in 1999, including mine. The courtroom shook with whispers, but Judge Bell held up his hand for quiet. Sergeant Ellis served his country honorably in missions that most of you will never hear about. He returned home with bruises that appear not on medical records, but on the hearts of those who love him, and medals that could never be worn in public. Raymond was gazing at the judge now, shock and recognition on his face. My life has been enriched by Sergeant Ellis's sacrifice for 23 years. I attended law school, established a career, raised children, served this community as a judge, all because a young soldier determined my life was worth saving. Judge Bell retired from the bench as he had the previous day, but this time he walked deliberately toward Raymond. And for 23 years this same soldier has gone unseen in this community, sleeping on the streets, sweeping our courthouse steps for free, asking for nothing, getting nothing. The judge came to Raymond's row and hesitated. Until today, Judge Bell pulled out of his robes a small velvet box. He opened it to show a Bronze Star medal and an official certificate. This medal was presented to Sergeant Ellis in 1999 for gallantry in action against an armed enemy. It was misplaced when his personal items were stolen a number of years ago. It has been replaced by the Department of Defense at my request. Judge Bell's voice became stronger. I appear before you not as your judge, but as a man whose life was saved by the man this community has chosen to forget. He motioned Raymond to his feet. Raymond stood hesitantly after a moment, his demeanor suddenly more upright for all his tattered clothes. Sergeant Ellis has never sought recognition. He has never required thanks. He has never spoken of his story or sought sympathy. But silence isn't always golden, and there are debts that must be paid with knowledge. Judge Bell removed the Bronze Star from the box and walked towards Raymond. By power vested in me by this court and before this community, I hereby restored to Staff Sergeant Raymond Ellis the honor he never wanted but always earned. He fixed the medal onto Raymond's jacket with unshaking hands as the whole courtroom stood in pure silence. This courtroom is in his debt more than silence, Judge Bell declared, using words that had left everyone confounded the previous day. It is in his debt for the respect, dignity, and acknowledgement that 23 years of disregard denied him. Raymond held his ground immobile as the medal was fastened onto his chest. For the first time in years, he lifted his head and gazed straight at those around him. He did not say a word. He did not have to, but in his eyes, something long lost was finally, silently regained. The first one to stand was Sarah Martinez. Then Judge Bell himself stood at attention. One by one, all those in the courtroom stood, not in applause, but in recognition, in acknowledgement, in the kind of respect that comes not from knowing someone's story, but from finally understanding their worth. The video of Judge Bell's announcement spread faster than any courthouse scandal ever had. But this time, the viral story wasn't about conflict. It was about recognition, redemption, and the power of truth delayed, but not denied. Within 48 hours, the news was up on national news sites. Judge honors homeless veteran he served with was the headline that renewed faith in a news cycle otherwise filled with division. But the real transformation was occurring in Millfield itself. 1 week following the courthouse discovery, the community opened a small fundraising campaign. The objective was straightforward: recycle Raymond's former apartment complex, one that he had lost 8 years before, into a community library for veterans who had struggled with difficult homecomings. The complex had sat vacant for 3 years, it was county property, and it was going to be demolished. In a matter of days after the courthouse situation, the county commissioners voted unanimously to give the building to the new veterans community library. Sarah Martinez, whose accidental discovery of Raymond's notebook had initiated the revelation, served as the library coordinator. She had been offered a scholarship from an organization advocating for veterans but decided to put off law school for a year. "I've learned more about justice in the last week than I ever did in 2 years of law school," she said in the local newspaper. "Sometimes justice isn't about winning cases, and sometimes it's just about ensuring the right individuals are remembered." The library renovation had lasted 3 months. Throughout those 3 months, Raymond went about his daily routine at the courthouse, yet with one major addition. Sarah had requested he assist in choosing books and materials for the library. The first time in years someone had ever asked him to provide input on anything that was important. On the front wall of the library, Sarah mounted a page from Raymond's notebook, the one that began it all. "No one has to know, but if only one person remembers, I won't be gone entirely." Underneath, she mounted a small placard, "In commemoration of all vets whose experiences should be remembered." One day, while Raymond was sweeping the courthouse steps, a stranger came over to him. The man was middle-aged, with a nervous face and a small white card in his hand. "Mr. Ellis," said the man cautiously, "I don't think you know me. I was one of the people posting online about you. I said some things." Raymond looked up from his work, studying the man's face. He didn't recognize him, but he understood. "I was wrong," the man continued. "I believe the worst about you without knowing anything. I'm sorry." He handed Raymond the white card. Written on it in simple handwriting were 3 words. "I was wrong." The man walked away without waiting for a response. Raymond looked at the card for a long moment, then placed it carefully in his shirt pocket. The Veterans Community Library opened. On a crisp January morning, the ceremony was small. No politicians, no media circus, just Raymond, Sarah, Judge Bell, and about 20 community members who had come to understand the importance of the moment. But the most meaningful attendees were a group of 15 students from Jefferson Elementary School. Their teacher, Mrs. Cooper, had brought them to learn about the library and about the veteran who had inspired its creation. The students formed a quiet line as Sarah gave them a tour of the small library. They saw the reading corner with comfortable chairs, the section dedicated to military history, and the wall where Raymond's notebook page was displayed. As the tour ended, something remarkable happened. The students started filing past Raymond, who stood quietly near the entrance. Without any prompting by their teacher, each child stopped briefly as they passed him. The first student, a girl of about 8 years old, stopped and placed her small hand over her heart in a gesture of respect she had learned in school when they said the Pledge of Allegiance. One by one, other students did the same. 14 children filing past an old veteran in worn clothes, each putting a hand over their heart in silent acknowledgement of something they didn't fully understand, but somehow recognized as important. Raymond felt a sense of wonder with this procession. For 8 years, children had avoided him on the streets. Parents had pulled their kids away from the scary homeless man. Now, these young people were showing him respect without being asked to, simply because they had learned his story. When the last child had passed, Raymond looked around the small library at the books that would help other veterans tell their stories. At the comfortable chairs where people could sit and remember and heal at his own words on the wall, as a reminder that every person's story matters. Sarah Martinez approached him as the students were leaving. "What do you think?" she asked. Raymond was silent for a long time. Then he took the white card the man had handed him that morning from his shirt pocket. "I think," he said slowly, "that admitting you made a mistake is sometimes more difficult than being right the first time." He stared at the card, then at Sarah. "But both are important." That night, for the first time in 3 months, Raymond added a new entry to his notebook. He wrote it sitting in one of the library's comfortable chairs, surrounded by books and the lingering presence of the children who had honored him with their simple act. "Sometimes justice doesn't arrive soon enough," he wrote. "But when it does, it brings more than you bargained for. It brings the next generation learning to remember." He stopped, then added, "Maybe that's enough to build on." Outside, the courthouse steps waited for their morning cleaning. But inside the Veterans Community Library, a different kind of service was starting. The service of memory, of story, of making sure that those who had been forgotten would be forgotten no more. He didn't say anything, he didn't beg, but when he fell, a man in robes stood up to remind us who he used to be. Raymond Ellis never asked to be remembered. For 23 years, he swept courthouse steps and bore secrets that technically did not exist. When society failed to notice him, when assumptions, took the place of investigation, he kept quiet. Sometimes it takes a judge stepping down from his bench to remind us that heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry visible evidence of their service. Sometimes they wear worn jackets and bear invisible wounds. The viral video that forever changed. The life of Raymond spread because people recognized something rare. The moment when truth vanquishes assumption, when recognition crowns invisibility, when a community learns that worthiness isn't measured by appearance but by character. Some debts can only be repaid with memory, with respect, with understanding. That service appears in many flavors. Have you ever witnessed someone forgotten only to be remembered by the one person who mattered most? Tell us below. Subscribe to Deep Story Dispatch, where forgotten courage finds its voice again.